What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and I want to give you a brief update on our Toys for Tots drive. We are now at $8,501, just $1,500 away from $10,000. Would be an amazing place to end up after this week of fundraising. You can check out the video. I'll link in the description below to get an idea what's going on with that. Now, as I've kind of poked and prodded around the video game industry and what exactly it's like to work for a game development company, one particular company seemed to have more people reaching out than any other. And that was, of course, Blizzard. Now, that's probably because Blizzard is probably the largest employer of game developers and QA staff out there. But also, I've spoken a lot about Blizzard in particular, so I may have a lot of ears of current and former employees there. As you know, I've reported on some of the working conditions there, and throughout the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've probably received about 50 different emails from both current and former employees at Blizzard. There's been a lot to say about what it's like to work in games development, and particularly at Blizzard, that I really haven't shared with you because some of it's kind of sad and some of it is perhaps too identifying for those sharing it. But I did want to put a bow. I wanted to kind of summarize what was shared with me. I picked some of the common themes, the common elements that many of these people all said the exact same thing. Things like, working for Blizzard was my dream job. Almost every email from a current or former employee started out with that, or led or put it somewhere in that very first email where they reached out to me, all reaching the same conclusion at the end, that it was in fact a nightmare as opposed to their dream job. Now, I don't know what that's like. I've always wanted to kind of work on my own, and I've always had a passion for YouTube, and while it has its drawbacks, believe me, I've never really worked in a giant company like this, but what I do understand is it's easy to fall through the cracks, and that a few isolated stories probably don't represent literally everybody that works at Blizzard. So I want to put that out there. I'm sure there are many people that work at Blizzard that are very happy and didn't have these experiences, but I would be ignoring my duty to share some of these stories if I didn't. Now, if it were just 1 or 2 people that had said these similar things, that definitely would have not warranted a single video like this. It may have been mentioned in one of my previous videos. But the more people I talked to from Blizzard, they kept mentioning things like, it was my dream job, or after I quit, I needed weeks or months just to detox, stories of mismanagement, people without training, leading teams, not doing it right, ignoring requests for HR intervention, things like that. And I want to share some quotes with you. Firstly, one of the people I just finished an extensive interview with, if you remember, in my first video, I had asked them, or I had reported on workers living in communes. And while after talking with Mark Kern, I think we got a better picture of what it's like, and identified people that had to live this way as probably being in QA or support. Not that that makes it okay, but what it does do is it identifies a sector of the company where these stories must be coming from, because many people that reached out to me seem to be from QA and support, which is where you have your most passionate employees, your true fans of the IP, your true fans of the company, your dreamers working. And I asked one particular female that worked there, can you confirm about this living in communes thing? Certainly not everybody did, but did you see it? And she replied, I lived this. In 2013, I lived in a house with 4 other employees renting 1 room just to make ends meet. I took a pay cut from my former job to take my dream job at Blizzard. I also asked about morale, and she wrote, middle to upper management is mostly old guard and is burnt out or no longer cares about what they do. This then seeps downhill, making morale low, or just awful events. There's also a pretty terrible tale of bullying and insane reaction by upper management that I want to share. but I want to go through a couple of the hardest hitting quotes that I may or may not have shared in previous Blizzard videos because they were echoed by other people who had reached out to me. One particular quote that really was tough, but made a lot of sense to me goes as follows. The unfortunate truth is that many of us are exploited for our passion. Many people who fell in love with Diablo, StarCraft, and Warcraft work here because they believe in the IP and are willing to take a lower pay because it's a dream job. Anyone who speaks up will be dismissed by management as just being greedy. HR creates an internal website for our quote income and have a bottom line number include things such as government mandated healthcare, social security, tax, and more. The result, money that is removed from my take-home pay being shoved in my face as if it were a higher salary. The reason this exists is because if any of us were to take action, we'd be told we're easily replaceable because so many other people want in all the time. So it becomes a choice, a project that you believe in, and a game that your heart is dedicated to, or being able to afford a roof over your head. Now, I will concede that my first reaction to a lot of these stories is, look, it's an at-will job. Nobody's forcing you to work there. But I guess I never really grew up dreaming of working somewhere. And I see it's basically all these game development companies do benefit from this. It's easy to say, well, they take advantage of it. It's part of their business model. But I look at a company like Wizards of the Coast, and you just need to, if you want to laugh, go to the Wizards of the Coast Glassdoor reviews. You can read the same story over and over and over again. It seems like gaming companies exploit their fans' passion for the IP, underpay them, and treat them poorly, simply because there's always a long line of people dedicated and loyal and with the dream to work for, let's say, Magic the Gathering, or in this case, Blizzard, whether you grew up on World of Warcraft or Heroes of the Storm or Diablo or Overwatch or Hearthstone. These people have grown up, based on my conversations with them now, growing up dreaming of working there. And they say things like, when I was hired, I was offered 2 bonuses, and only one of them was rolled into the paycheck, but it was the larger one. The other bonus I got was around $4,000, and that was taxed 50%. So it's pretty insignificant and didn't make up for the pay difference at other companies. It's very common that Riot will snipe employees because their pay is so much higher. It's actually an inside joke. Whenever someone says that they are leaving, we say, enjoy yourself at Riot, regardless of why they're leaving. You pay for your passion, and they know they can get away with it. Corporatism is absolutely gutting Blizzard right now. Morale is extremely low. And in my conversations with Mark Kern, I think we identified that this initially felt like a negative downturn when Activision came on board, but it actually goes back to things going downhill back when Morhaime left. And while there are corporate things that are getting done at a company of this size, it's really unavoidable when you have thousands of employees. And it made me really feel bad for a lot of these kids that get a job there, and it's so cool, and it's so cool to say you work at Blizzard, but they end up burnt out, disillusioned. And I don't know what kind of stress you would need to be under to need several weeks or months just to detox from your job. But when I interviewed a former WoW lead and longtime Blizzard employee, Mark Kern, he mentioned the same thing about needing several months just to clear his head and sleep and get caught up because of the immense pressure that they were under. Now, whose fault is the low pay and the pressure? Well, there's corporate greed, yes, of course, but we, the consumer, also bear some responsibility by making certain demands of the company that they feel like they need to meet. Now, I think our percentage of blame is certainly far, far less than, for example, hiring only fans because you know you can pay them less. And there's a lot of blame to be put on this whole crunch time, which I understand it as not how it's been described to me by people that work there. I hear this whole crunch issue as poor management. A lot of people talk about, we saw this with the Red Dead Redemption 2 and all these gaming journalism outlets talking about crunch time and how it's so absurd that everyone has to, break their back, work in 20-hour days for 3 weeks to make sure something hits deadline. While that is crummy, that's also a part of life. That's what deadlines do to people. It's something that most of us will deal with in our life. One wonders if better management, better time management would help alleviate that. When you have something like an MMO whose development cycle is something like 5 or more years, you have a lot of opportunities in that 5 years to get yourself behind. So better management, I think, would help the crunch period. That's my determination of it as somebody that does not work in game development, but works with large businesses and corporations across America. I see it time and time again. You have scope creep when you start a project and you continually add more and more and more to it. That gets you behind. Or because you have such a long life cycle of the product that you get lazy. You work 35 hours a week for the first year. Then the second year you do it again. Well, somewhere, sometime, that bill becomes due. And that's maturity. That's high quality management. Something, in my opinion, after speaking to so many Blizzard employees, they sorely lack. The middle management sounds woefully underskilled to manage teams of creative-minded people and to herd cats in a way to keep everyone on time. Now, I want to finish this video with probably one of the toughest, most kind of heartbreaking stories. And I'm going to read a lot verbatim here because I think this person's story mirrored a lot of the things other people said. I'm going to start at the end. I left Blizzard completely defeated, heartbroken, and hating what I did as a career. I had to take a sabbatical of nearly 4 months to mentally and emotionally detox. This is an employee that was dealing with internal issues with other employees, at least specifically one in particular. And this is on this interaction with that employee. I eventually broke down because I no longer felt safe working near this person, nor did I have the mental state to focus on all the tasks at hand. I went above my manager to a higher up I trusted. I told him everything. This is when I realized I was liked because I put out fires and got results. Anything else that gave me an air of human-like emotion was discarded and not well received. The higher up I thought would understand me just told me, quote, "You were hired to do a job. If you can't handle it, then you need to figure yourself out." He later told an acquaintance of mine that I should just belly up and stop my squabble. The bullying escalated to HR after one really bad week. Verbal attack in front of many. I left the room shaking, numb in the face. I took a leave of absence for my health as I experienced the first of many anxiety attacks to come. This is a common theme, in my opinion, when people are speaking of the management at Blizzard. They are just completely incapable of understanding basic business, basic corporate culture. And this is common when you look at companies, for example, like Wizards of the Coast. Companies that are run by gamers have huge problems doing the basics that any McDonald's manager or Wendy's manager would get right 95 times out of 100. They seem to get it wrong almost always. During this time off, I also asked an investigation take place. This ended up going nowhere. I was only humiliated some more in which I can only assume this, quote, third company worked for the benefit of Blizzard, of course, which they often do, and its employees. My coworkers were too scared to speak up on my behalf, or when they witnessed this bullying, because they didn't want to, quote, end up like me or afraid of retaliation. They disregarded my distress and fear of my livelihood if I couldn't do my job. Over and over, I was told that I just had to, quote, make it work, and they couldn't accommodate me more than they already had. To which I asked about her boss. I said, why did you go around your boss? You didn't get any resolution there. And here is a quote from her reply. His professionalism and the way he ran things left much to be desired, like screaming at people or belittling them in meetings. On top of this, I had been passed over for promotions a few times, and underskilled people would always be hired from the outside above me and other coworkers who had been passed over for years because the higher-ups neighborhood kids played a ton of Blizzard games and just got out of school. Easy to underpay instead of paying for a skilled person. And to bring that same quote back to the end, I left Blizzard completely defeated, heartbroken, and hating what I did as a career. I had to take a sabbatical of 4 months to mentally and emotionally detox. And this is something that more than 5 of the people I talked to mentioned, needing time off, needing to just reassess, or just flat out getting into the meat grinder that is Blizzard and getting chewed up so badly that they just left game design or game development in its entirety. Now, again, I started this video by saying I would assume that most people that work at Blizzard are happy with their jobs, but it seems like there are many problems, particularly with the QA and support teams, which are kind of at the base level of the company, but also these are the people that are on the front lines of game development. What can be done? Well, it's hard to say, but throughout this entire investigation process and talking with game developers, I've come to realize that the overwhelming majority of them are just like you or I, passionate about something, whether it be a particular video game, an IP, a story, whatever it is. We can all relate to that. And it grew my respect for them and made me kind of forget about some of the more toxic game developers that are often accusing the fandom. And I realized that these people that I so often like to make fun of are by far and away the overwhelming minority of the game development community. And while it's easier to blame the corporation, and rightfully so, for a lot of these problems, that they need to treat their employees better, this much is clear. I have a newfound respect for game developers and the process to make some of the games we so greatly love. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.